Hey folks, Bill Reel here. We will start shortly. Let me just make sure my settings are good. Sorry about that. For some reason, we ended up with a start time that wasn't correct, and we'll pick up here in just a moment. So bear with us. If you're watching this on YouTube after today, you'll just hear me right now and skip forward a few minutes. But RFM will not be joining us today. It will just be Maven and myself. We're going to have an exciting conversation about this new Joseph Smith photo, and we'll go through the history of various images that have come out since the organization of the church in regards to Joseph Smith. And I think we've got a fun, entertaining show for you. So we'll be back in a few minutes, and look forward to seeing all of you in a moment.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, we proudly bring to you Mormonism Live!
Shut up and sit down.
You'll have to unmute yourself there, Maven. All right, folks.
Okay. Just trying new videos, so that's a great start, I think, is telling me that I need to unmute myself.
Yeah, no. That's the standard practice here at Mormonism Live, isn't it?
Yes, and a very enthusiastic audience response there.
Yeah, look at that. Well, I'm glad that you and I are here. Folks are asking where RFM is. He is in Salt Lake City. He'll be at Sunstone this weekend doing magic tricks. I'm kind of tempted to know what kind of magic tricks and what kind of cool stuff RFM's doing. What do you think?
Well, one of them is not being in two places at once, or else he would be here.
No, otherwise he'd be here.
That'd be a good one to see.
Yeah, very much so. Maven's done a lot of work behind the scenes, putting a PowerPoint and slides and stuff together. We both have spent a lot of time researching this issue and thinking about things. We've got a lot of stuff to share with you. We're a few minutes early. I apologize, folks. I don't know what happened, but when I created the stream link, I must have accidentally created it for 6 p.m. instead of 6:20. I try to pay close attention to that, but this is the second time I've done that. And I just didn't want this large gap in between our having to start, because then StreamYard forces you to start the stream within 10 minutes of your scheduled time.
Right.
And so we just wanted to make sure we got on the air here so there wasn't a big block of silence or that we lost the stream altogether. So here we are. And tonight, this course of the last week, we've had this photograph that this daguerreotype that dropped that is alleged to be the prophet Joseph Smith. And we'll get to that soon enough. But Maven, I'm going to put your PowerPoint up on the screen, and I'm going to switch to, look at that. I've been doing a little work behind the scenes myself to create some things with your name on it. So
nice.
Cool.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So where I think I would like to start is this idea of, let's first talk about the things we know that are images of the prophet Joseph Smith that have some direct connection to his life. And the easy one is the death mask. And we had replicas of these in our pawn shop. We sold them last year. The owner of our company, and also my friend, Chris Bloxam, has a set at his home that are, I believe, either the one of the first ones by Wilford Wood or a immediate making from the first ones, reproduction from those, but by Wilford Wood. And so just to note, the death mask is the most direct representation, though we should recognize that since the mask did not cover his entire face, his face appears more narrow than it actually was. And also it was made less than 24 hours after he had been killed. But we're also talking about June in Nauvoo, Illinois. We're talking about the middle of summer and the hot heat and some of the effects that would have had on Joseph's, not only his face, but his body in general. And so there still would have been significant changes in the face of Smith that would have distorted the death mask appearance. Some of it would have been
injured as well, falling from the window. Perhaps. Things.
Yeah, absolutely. Some things that happen when people die in terms of their faces. There's sometimes like a sinking in the jaw. There's sinking in various parts of the face. Rigor mortis has set in. As you point out, I mean, Smith is, violently killed and falls out of a second floor window. And there's some discussion of propping him back up and shooting him a few more times. And so that may have happened as well. And if so, to recognize the effect that might have had on the death mask. But this is the most direct representation of the prophet Joseph Smith that we get.
I'm curious. This is just a side thing. You said you sold them at the punch. I wonder if Deseret Book has ever sold it. And I just kind of wonder how common replicas of this death mask are among fans,
Yeah. I'm aware of about 6 sets of them, Joseph Smith and Hiram Smith. Okay. Hiram, of course, has the wound by the side of his nose. You can make that out where they kind of stuffed it and you can just tell the wounds there next to his nose where he got shot and killed immediately. But I think there's at least 6 sets out there. There may be hundreds of them. I don't know. And maybe there's money to be made if people want to make extra duplicates, right? 3D printer and make them and sell them on eBay or something. But kind of a what's the word? It's kind of a sad thing to contemplate. But anyway, that was kind of the way that people did back then, was to make death masks. There's death mask of Abraham Lincoln and lots of famous figures in that time period, kind of the 1840s to 1870s. You see a lot of those even earlier, 1830s, 1820s. But death masks were kind of a common thing because, as we'll get to, the daguerreotypes and photographs are kind of just starting to come on the scene,
right,
in this time period.
I would imagine it's your last chance to get something or have something that would remind you what they look like.
Yep, totally. So the next thing, there's the I think it's Sutcliffe Maudsley is brought in, and he does this side portrait of Joseph Smith. And so Joseph would have been present for this, and Maudsley would have done the portrait. And it has the side view, so it doesn't really help us a ton with kind of what Joseph would have looked like from the front, but to at least acknowledge that outside the death mask, this is one of, one or two other things that represent Smith, at least on some level, somewhat directly. But yeah, kind of an interesting thing that got done there. And there's some mix-ups that happen here as we go along the way as well, where the Maudsley art is often confused with the David Rogers art, which we'll get to in a few minutes. Any thoughts on that one?
So I have to say, for a lot of these earlier portraits, I mean, I had seen them over the past few years, but growing up, where it was all the newer stuff that we're going to see kind of at the end. So we're going in order here, but I did just want to say, the later ones have them a lot more, I guess, a lot better looking, I think, if I'm honest, than these earlier ones. And it was really quite a shock to me the first time seeing some of these. So this was one of them. I think then one of the next few coming up is, is worse, I guess. I don't know. It was just something really jarring to go from like some of these like Joseph Smith movies, and then to see some of these portraits, which are obviously more accurate than whatever good looking actor that they're getting to play this role. So it's just interesting to look and see what it really looked like.
Yeah. And when we get to the David Rogers one, which is the one that really Mormonism in all of its facets, all of its breakoffs, kind of uses as the representation of Joseph Smith moving forward. And there are some issues with that. And there's some things I think it does well in trying to represent him, but we'll get to some of that as well. This is obviously connected. This is
the one I was thinking of. The first time I saw it, I was just like, that's Joseph Smith.
Yeah. And you get that look, but it's also, you can just tell it's to some degree, it's using some of the same kind of art to do that. So there's this piece here, and I don't have a name of an artist for this particular piece, but I believe that it's connected to the Maudsley, Sutcliffe Maudsley. And then this here was Joseph Smith by L. Gagan, and I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. 1850, President John Taylor commissioned this sculpture. He and other men who had known the prophet met with and advised Lucius Gagan in England. Gagan used sketches done from life by Sutcliffe Maudsley and the death mask to make portrait bust of both Joseph and Hiram. Because it was created with input from Joseph Smith's friends, it talks about how significant that is, that there is some, at least, collaboration with those who had known the prophet Joseph Smith during his life. And so how close it is, who knows? But as you point out, I think that one and this kind of connect to each other. They look like a very similar Joseph Smith. Mm-hmm. And again, goes back to that Maudsley art piece that was used to do that.
Some good comments here about later paintings are more iconographic, trying to portray the charisma and the significance to followers. And yeah, so it makes sense that early portraits would maybe not necessarily be about what they really look like, but maybe what they represent to people. I can see that.
Yeah. Yep. And then you've got some pieces that come soon after, but they're not directly connected to Joseph Smith. You have, for instance, this is Joseph Smith Jr. by Alvin Gittins, 1959, so quite a bit later. Gittins' portrait says it was the first to consciously use the death mask as an information source, but as I just pointed out, the sculpture also did that, the one we just showed before. So you have that one, Alvin Gittins, and then you've got this here, Joseph Smith by D.J. Bodden, 1981. To create an accurate likeness, Bodden used Joseph Smith's skeletal measurements along with the death mask. And there were some damage to those skulls when they were uncovered. And so even that is a little trickier than simply just taking a skull that's completely intact and using measurements from it. But there is some attempt here to do that.
Were those written down or something? Because my understanding is we don't know where Joseph's body is or was buried or anything like that.
Yeah, originally. So what happened was the body was buried, and then Emma Smith moved the skeletal remains to another spot. And then I think it was like in the maybe Dan Vogel will answer or whatnot, but I think it was in the 1970s, 1980s, something like that, where the skeletal remains were uncovered. So I do believe that those remains were discovered, and they were able to take measurements and look at them. And there was quite a bit of damage to both skulls. So there's that. So
okay.
you've got this,
because I thought they were still like not even around. So.
No. Yeah. Emma moved them. She was afraid people would tamper with them, but I believe the reorganized church, now the Community of Christ, ended up locating those and have moved those to a final burial place there in Nauvoo. So yeah, I know they were they were refound essentially and reburied.
Joe Walker says secretly buried in the Nauvoo house basement with false coffins originally, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's that one. And then this here is a spliced image of Baldwin's face of the prophet juxtaposed with the death mask. And one of the issues you have with this, and this may be a somewhat short episode, we'll see how far this goes, but one of the issues you have with this image is that when you do a death mask, you're not getting the whole face. Like you kind of stop at a certain point, and so you lose a little bit kind of the width of the total face. And so then when you try to create a mirror image or try to recreate that facial structure, you end up losing a little bit of it, and you don't know it necessarily, but that's the case. So again, you see kind of what they do here with the death mask, along with creating that Bodden sculpture head. But I'm not as trusting of the width of that appearance and whether that actually works. Let's see here. And then I wanted to talk a little bit too about, there's some other folks who have brought things forward, and we'll get into some of these that are alleged images of Joseph Smith. But this one I found, this was on a Reddit post, and I tried to reach out to the Reddit user and see if they would respond and tell me what AI software they were speaking of. But there was a Reddit post where somebody was claiming that they had ran the Smith portraits through AI software, and that the software accounted for the paint styles of the time by David Rogers, which we'll get to in a moment, which is that top left piece. But I'm really skeptical of that, right? Like how proficient is this AI software at knowing exactly how to take that top left picture of Joseph Smith and make it into what he would have looked like. But what does catch me is that, we'll see this later, is that this artificial image on the right actually has a little bit of similarity to the photo that was found this week. And so I thought that was kind of interesting. And then now we'll talk a minute about, I wanted to get to the David Rogers one, and then we'll talk about some alleged images that are out there. By the way, I mean, Emma translating over. Both of those are, decent looking guy, decent looking woman. And again, who knows how attractive, because we still want to fight over whether even this newest photo is Joseph Smith or not. But this is the David Rogers image, and this is important for several reasons. This is really the moment where Mormonism goes, okay, that's going to be our prophet. That's Joseph Smith. And everything going forward attempts to kind of use this as kind of ground zero to form what the prophet Joseph Smith is going to look like. This was done, I believe, around 1842, 1843. The original is owned by the Community of Christ. It is on display, at least last I knew, it was on display at the Community of Christ headquarters in Independence, Missouri, where its provenance is explained. The painting was originally in the possession of Emma Smith, and if I'm not mistaken, it used to be stored downstairs, and then at some point it was moved upstairs to her bedroom with a lot of other things, because she, I think justifiably so, seemed to be worried that people might try to take some of these things. And you can only imagine, all the reasons for why that would be. It says the painting then was in the possession of Joseph Smith III. He died in 1914. He's recorded as commenting on the painting. We'll share that here in just a moment. And the 1842 date is given by the Community of Christ. This is the painting that Joseph III stated looked the most like his father. It is important to note that Joseph III stated this painting was created the same year that his father had his picture taken, and we'll get to that too. There's another little mix-up that happens. The portrait was painted from the daguerreotype sometime during the 1840s. Again, we say 1842, but it could have been 1843 as well. And let me just see if I got any other notes on this one. Yeah, so the next thing here is this image, and then also I'll show this one. So Joseph Smith III went through at least most of his life believing that this was an actual photograph of his father. But really what it turned out to be was that this is a photograph of a daguerreotype of the original painting. And so he thought this was a photo of his dad, but in reality, it's a copy of the original painting. And so there was some confusion throughout his life about that. And I'll just note here.
I was thinking it's like an older version of, when your grandmother can't get a picture sent to you on the internet, so she takes a picture with her phone and then prints it out at the library and then sends it to you. It's kind of a layered on layered on layered.
And so this new photo comes out, and again, we'll get to that in a moment, but this new photo comes out and there's this debate, like, is this Joseph? Is it not? It's so much different than this David Rogers image. And it should be noted what Emma Smith said about this particular image and what we believe Joseph Smith III says about this image as well. So in regards to Emma Smith, let's see here. So let me start with Joseph. So Joseph mentioned, this is Joseph Smith, the prophet, the founder of the Restoration, not his son. Joseph mentions one other artist who came to capture his image during his lifetime. In a series of journal entries from mid-September of 1842, so there's the 1842 date, he writes, Friday the 16th at home with Brother Rogers, who was painting my likeness. Saturday the 17th, I was home with Brother Rogers, who continued painting my portrait. Monday the 19th and Tuesday the 20th with Brother Rogers painting at my house. History of the Church, period 1, volume 5, pages 162, 164, and 165. And then here's Junius Wells wrote in the Juvenile Instructor on February 1930. This is pages 79 to 80. Junius Wells, the first head of the Young Men's Organization for the Church and a magazine editor, said of the Rogers painting, it hung first in the Mansion House and afterward in the Nauvoo House in possession of the prophet's widow, Emma Smith. Upon visiting her in the winter of 1875, 1876, she entertained me very hospitably and showed me the painting, then hanging in her bedroom in the Nauvoo house. And here's the money quote. I asked her if it were a good likeness of the prophet. She replied, no, he could not have a good portrait. His countenance was changing all the time. I then asked her what he, meaning Joseph Smith the prophet, what he thought of it. And she replied, I can tell you that, for I asked him, and he said, Emma, that is a nice painting of a silly boy, but it don't look much like a prophet of the Lord. Junius F. Wells, Portraits of Joseph Smith the Prophet, Juvenile Instructor, again, February 1930, pages 79 to 80. So Emma Smith doesn't think it's a very good representation of Joseph. Joseph Smith the prophet doesn't think it's a very good representation of of Joseph. And then you've got this really interesting.
I want to jump in here.
Please.
I like this quote because I feel like most of the quotes that you grow up on from Joseph Smith are at least portrayed as really profound. And so I feel like this is probably a much more true representation of how he spoke. It don't much look like a prophet of the Lord.
Yeah.
And especially when we know how the Book of Mormon sounded originally before the grammatical fixes. I just wonder how jarring it would be if we were able to meet him, or if we were able to pop up and he was talking like that. It's just a funny picture in my mind. But I think, that's more who he really was. So yeah, a little less polished than they want you to think sometimes.
And I was thinking about so I'll show you a cool little picture here. This will be interesting. So, okay, so that is me and Amanda, right?
Well, I'm going to make you bigger, I think. Let me take a
okay, please.
Down. There we go.
So there we are. There's a portrait that was done of me and my wife, and it kind of looks like me. But the reality is that if we start off with an image, Maven, that isn't very good, and we then move forward in history basing all of our representations kind of off that look, then what we're left with is something that really kind of falls short of being able to kind of capture it. And so all of us have in our minds the prophet Joseph Smith and what he should look like. But if somebody then, 300 years later, 200 years later, whatever, found a real photo of me, and all this art had been created based on that original portrait, then suddenly we're going to have to wrestle with it isn't exactly right. And so we'll get to some of the things that maybe
an art version of the telephone game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we'll get to some of the things that are striking, at least if for those who are going I think that is the prophet Joseph Smith, and we'll get to whether you or I think that. It's really difficult sometimes to overcome hundreds of years of thinking the wrong thing. But we got to note, again, Joseph Smith, the prophet himself, and his wife Emma both thought this David Rogers image didn't represent him well. He said it looked like a silly boy. And when I hear that, what I hear is it's too smooth. It's too young looking. It's too polished, as you used the word earlier, come out of speech, but the image is too polished. It's a nice, clean, young looking guy. And both Joseph and Emma didn't think it quite represented him appropriately. Now there's this really interesting correspondence, back on March 5th of 1910, the Salt Lake Tribune publishes an image of the prophet Joseph Smith. It's just a drawing or portrait or something. And it gets back to Joseph Smith III. And he is bothered by how the LDS Church is imposing that this other image, which I don't have handy, but the other image is what the prophet Joseph Smith looked like. And here's what Joseph Smith III said. Independence, Missouri, March 10th, 1910. Publishers, Salt Lake Tribune, Salt Lake City, Utah. Gentlemen, I notice in your issue of Saturday morning, March 5th, 1910, a copy, excuse me, a copy of which was handed to me by a neighbor, a cut purporting to represent a life-size portrait of my father. Joseph Smith, painted by a Utah artist. I do not regret to see the picture, but I do regret to know that all the reverence said to be held by the people of Utah toward Joseph Smith, the first president of the church, they know so little about the appearance of the man. I regret the statement that is made that there is no authentic picture of my father in existence, for this is a mistake. Now, here's what's going on. He thinks this is a legitimate photograph of his dad. He's 11 years old when his dad passes away. You can certainly understand why he may have supplanted his original kind of memory of what dad looked like with this artwork that would have been hanging in his, mom's home over the years as he's growing up. And his memory would have been like, hey, that's my dad. Because again, being 11 years old when his dad dies, I think we can understand kind of the trauma of that.
Yeah.
And so he thinks this is a real photo, and he knows that the David Rogers art exists. So he says, I regret the statement that is made that there is no authentic picture of my father in existence, for this is a mistake. If your artist, Mr. Ramsey, should ever visit the capital of Iowa, he will find a duplicate oil painting of Joseph Smith in one of the halls, placed there by myself and my son at the request of Mr. Charles Aldridge, then curator of the Historical Society. There is an authentic oil painting now in the possession of my son, Frederick M. Smith, at Independence, Missouri, painted by the same artists that painted one of my uncle, Hiram Smith, which has formed a basis of pictures of him since his family went to Utah. It fortunately happens to us that this portrait, painted in 1843, is sustained in its characteristic likeness to my father by the daguerreotype, which is that, in our possession, taken the same year. I think by an artist by the name of Lucian Foster. And we'll get to Lucian here in a moment. But it's actually David Rogers. So again, he knows, and it's also important to note, by him naming Lucian Foster, he's aware that Lucian Foster is the person in town who can do the daguerreotypes right towards the end of Joseph Smith and Hiram Smith's life. His mention of them is important because it gives us the room to go like, hey, let's look at Lucian as possibly the creator of the actual daguerreotype that has come into the public's hands in the last week. So he mixes up Foster with David Rogers because, again, he thinks this is a daguerreotype image and that the painting was created from that, when in actuality it's in reverse. Any thoughts at this moment?
Nope. I'm just putting up some comments from others, just kind of talking about how it's made to look better than usual. And it brought up a good point, just kind of like how our paintings of Jesus tend to get, they tend to follow, I guess, what the cultural norm is for what looks good. And so I think this is also something we see in these paintings throughout church history is what looks good at the time. So, yeah.
Yeah. All right. So there's that. And this, again, important. We'll come back to this image because it is the image, the only frontal face view of Joseph Smith that's done in the presence of Joseph Smith. Again, we've got Emma and Joseph commenting on it, at least through Emma as a secondhand witness of that. But what I want to talk about now are some images that have come up over the years. This one here is called the Scannell daguerreotype. Catherine Scannell, possibly Mitchell, donated this image to the RLDS Church in 1969, along with a hymnal produced by Emma Hale Smith that bore the name of William Orr Scannell, claiming she inherited both from her ancestor, Emily L. Smith Scannell, who was supposedly a relative of Joseph's. Historian Artis E. Partial pieced together a possible provenance from that information. I spoke to, and I think you were in this message group with Locke Mackay of the Community of Christ. I know him well because when I was a member of the church back in Ohio, Locke was kind of the head guy at all the Community of Christ, Kirtland, Ohio stuff. And so when we went to the Kirtland Temple to do a tour, Locke was often the person who did the tours. And I was kind of rude to him on an occasion or two. I went to the temple going like, I know my Mormonism's true. I know his Mormonism isn't. And I would try to like stump him with questions. Turns out that Locke has always been very involved with the community of Christ. He today is one of their 12 apostles, and he still oversees much of the history functions of their faith. And I met Locke in person again at Sunstone a couple of years ago, and my wife and I and a few other people sat down and had lunch with him. And I apologized to him, and I said, "Hey, Locke, you're not ever going to remember me, but I remember you. Here's what I did. I wasn't very nice to you. I was trying to kind of show the room that your Mormonism was wrong and mine was true." And I said it wasn't very nice of me, and I apologized up and down. And he forgave me as a good apostle would. And I'll just tell you, he's a good guy. Like I've been,
most Mormons would never do that. So
yeah.
Yeah, you must be the only one, probably.
Yeah. I'm the only one who wants to bash with someone else, right? And he's a really good guy. And again, he's one of their 12 apostles now. And he's very involved in this whole release of this new image that, again, we'll get into in a moment. But I asked him about this particular image, and he said, look, I don't really want to talk at length about this one because we're really focused on the new one that came out. But he said there's pretty good provenance on this. And we should note, daguerreotypes it was invented in 1839. To make the image, a daguerreotypist polished a sheet of silver-plated copper to a mere finish, treated it with fumes that made its surface light-sensitive, exposed it in a camera for as long as was judged to be necessary, which could be as little as a few seconds for brightly sunlit subjects or much longer with less intense lighting, made the resulting latent image on it visible by fuming it with mercury vapor. Sounds real healthy, huh? Removed its sensitivity to light by liquid chemical treatment, rinsed it and dried it, and then sealed the easily marred result behind glass in a protective enclosure. So it would have like a powdery or scrapable finish, and if you brushed it too abrasively, you could ruin the daguerreotype. They would even say to the point where if someone was wearing jewelry, you could scratch where the jewelry was a little bit. It would expose some of that silver plating underneath, and then you'd get a shiny piece of jewelry in the daguerreotype photo. But this image here, we'll come back to when we kind of do some comparisons. But he said the provenance for this is pretty decent. And I'll say, because we'll get to it, this has some similarities to the photo that was found this week as well. Any thoughts from you on this particular one? Had you seen this before?
I had seen it, but I just thought I never gave much to it. I just thought it was somebody wanting it to be. I figured if there was some substance to it, then I would have heard more about it, so.
Yeah. I had seen this maybe, I don't know, a decade ago or so. And like you, I dismissed it pretty quickly because I also was aware, like, there are other folks that have submitted photos and said, this is the prophet Joseph Smith. We won't even get into some of them because they're just so obviously not, because of the provenance on them,
Right.
not because of appearance, because again, we don't know exactly what Joseph looked like. But
I heard it's very
interesting
common for people to purport to have pictures of Joseph Smith. So it's kind of, these aren't the only ones people have said. So it makes sense to me that there would be a lot of claims out there.
Yeah, but at least to recognize that the community of Christ, one of their apostles, Locke Mackay, believes this has some decent provenance to it. But he didn't want to spend a lot of time on this one. I totally understand why. They've got big news happening.
I feel like with this one, and maybe it's just because of the way the process is, it's not very accurate. And maybe that's kind of what's making it look so young to me. Because this process, Joseph would have been older still anyway, right?
Yeah, if it's invented in 1839, he's born in 1805, so you'd be 34 years old, essentially.
Yeah, and again, I understand that it might be just a little smoothed out because it's not super accurate, but it just looks so young to me.
It does. That looks like
that I have with it.
It's like a 25-year-old kid, doesn't it?
Yes. Yeah, really, like almost missionary age or something.
Yeah.
So,
totally. Then we've got this one. This one's interesting, and I'm going to discard this one pretty quick, but I thought the story behind it was cool. This one's called the Spiritus photograph. It's a daguerreotype image identified as Joseph Smith by an artificial intelligence program created in Great Britain. The daguerreotype, there was one that's claimed to be Brigham Young and one claimed to be Joseph Smith. They were found around 2015 in St. Louis, Missouri, allegedly together. The photos were found as part of a British-based research project into identifying people in historical photographs. A non-funded team from various relevant backgrounds worked on a 2-year project investigating combining face recognition techniques with other methods of determining the identity of people in historical photographs. There is, as you can imagine, a vast amount of research now involved in determining whether this man is truly Joseph Smith. It was part of a YouTube video, and you can see in the comments of the video, people are like, hey, could you explain your research process better? Hey, could you tell us how you went about locating that? And all the responses from this research team is, yeah, we're going to get back to you. We'll address these issues in more context and be more forthright about it. But right now we're still working on the project. And this was like a decade ago or so that the video came out. And so the video's old and they haven't responded to things anytime recent. But again, when we get to the new image found, it's strange how similar it is. So it does strike me as a bit odd. Anyway, you can see there the Joseph F. Smith III. So that's Joseph F. Smith, who ends up becoming a president of the church, I believe, his nephew. But you can see the striking similarity there. You can see the similarity with some of the other kids in the family. Alexander Hale Smith there, for instance. I think there are. If you were to tell me that guy on the left is the cousin or brother of those folks, I would easily believe that.
Me too.
So there's that. And then they had, in their video, they showed like trying to kind of juxtapose the faces. And again, you can kind of see where they got it. But the reality is they just found a couple of photos. They kind of look like two people that in historical analysis. And so they're claiming that it actually might be them. I think that's pretty weak. And then there's the picture of Brigham Young, allegedly, on the left, and then the picture of Joseph. And they said these were found together. But, I mean, you throw a Brigham Young beard on anybody, and then you can claim he's Brigham Young, right?
Yeah.
So, but, there are some similarities there. And then we get to the new photo, and we'll have a little fun with this here along the way. What were your thoughts when this came out? What was kind of going through your mind as this was all being debated back and forth and the news broke?
So before I get to that, actually, I want to highlight a comment before I forget it. Please. I feel like we missed an opportunity with the title of the show, although yours was good, a good Eminem reference. But yeah, No Man Knows My Face. I really like that, Elias Investigator. Yeah, so when this came out, I had seen it before because it didn't really just come out. It actually had been discovered earlier, I think, and had made a couple of rounds. I'm pretty sure I saw it earlier. But it just, again, was kind of in this group of like many people are claiming this. So I think what's my understanding now is the reason why it's in the news and why it's making the rounds is just because more has been done to vet it, and it seems more solid. So it was interesting to me to find out that there was more to it, that it really could be. But I'm kind of it's interesting to me almost how little I actually care, if that makes sense. It is an interesting topic, but he just was an awful man. And there's just so much that happens in this church that happened, in his time, things that he did, and just all of the, when you just think about all of the lies, all of the suffering, all of the bad things that have happened, I don't know, maybe I should feel hatred I don't feel hatred either, but it's just kind of like, I don't know. It's been kind of interesting to, I guess, look at my own feelings on this and just kind of see how ambivalent I actually am. I don't know if others feel the same way.
Yeah, I would add that it doesn't matter a bunch to me. I put a bunch of posts on Facebook this week, so I'm kind of talking out both sides of my mouth. But it's interesting to me only because I have spent numerous occasions looking up the art that we do have of Joseph Smith, including all of these alleged photos that we just went through, along with the early artwork by Rogers and Maudsley, and trying to kind of figure out what the prophet looked like. I've got a book that's images of the prophet Joseph Smith, where they go through accounts of like what
no man knows my face. They missed an opportunity.
Yeah. And so there were accounts of like what he was speaking like, what he dressed like, how he treated people, like all these various witnesses, good and bad, about who he was, both appearance and behavior, and trying to figure out who Joseph Smith was. And much of that was on like his appearance, what he looked like. And so I found it interesting that so much time has gone by. We have an idea in our head about what Joseph looked like. And here's this moment where we go like, maybe the image we've all had for, 200 years is not right. It's not really that close, which would go right in line with what Emma said and what Emma said her husband had told her. So from that point of view, I think it's interesting that whenever we have an idea of reality and that idea goes on for a long, long time, and suddenly reality or something closer to it smacks us in the face, we all have to kind of like go like, oh, like how important is this? And kind of wrestle with the idea of like, does this change anything? Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, some people have pointed this out in the chat as well. I do think what's interesting about, I guess, kind of the effect that this picture coming out has is because there hasn't been something, I feel it kind of adds to the like mythicism around Joseph Smith. You know what I mean? By not having something really concrete, it's just like with God or with Jesus or with any other historical figure, or even literary, a fake, in a fiction book, you have the freedom of your mind to make this person whoever you want them to be and look like how you want them to. And so having this out does kind of ground him more in reality, and I feel like it does make him more modest, more of a man, a mortal man.
Yeah, this is much more looking like just a normal guy, right? Than all this artwork that we've created around him. And I was impressed by the fact when this first happened, I thought, okay, it came out. And then when I read the John Whitmer Historical Association PDF this week and listened to an interview where Locke and John Hamer were interviewed, and realized all the work that went in behind the scenes before publishing this to say, hey, we've done our due diligence. We've tried to figure out the provenance of the locket, which we can talk about here in a moment. We tried to figure out, looking at other members of the family who wore this pendant, if it might be something, someone else, not necessarily Joseph Smith, but it might be somebody on the other side of the family or some other important person in this family tree. And they did their due diligence and they just couldn't locate any of that. I've seen people suggest maybe this is Hiram Smith, and I'm struggling with that because I can't make sense of why these particular members of the family would be wearing their great great uncle in a pendant rather than their great great grandfather or whatnot. But it's such a cool thing that's, to have this happen again, maybe not as interesting for those of us who recognize the history and know some of the hurt and trauma that Joseph Smith did and caused and imposed on others, especially young girls and women. But there's that. I know a lot of people too said that the image looks older than what Joseph Smith should have been at the time this would have been done. I'll show a close-up here in a little bit, but I've got some thoughts on that. I'm not so sure that we're maybe seeing things that aren't there per se. My first thing when I saw this image was you hear about all the bad things that Joseph Smith did, all the predatory behavior on women and girls, specifically girls that he groomed, got them into his home to be either a maid or to live for a while or to stay with him, that he would treat these girls to the public as if he was watching over them as a father-daughter sort of relationship. and then ends up doing some horrible things in terms of high pressure, threats of, spiritual destruction, if in trying to enter intimate relationships with them. And we should never judge anybody by their appearance. Like, just because someone's good looking or pure looking, or they look like they're a bad guy, like, appearance doesn't mean anything. But I will say, when I saw this image, I'm like, that looks like a guy who is capable of what Joseph Smith did. And the pure image just seems a little harder to make that kind of work inside your head, even though look should have nothing to do with it. Did you kind of think that as well?
Yeah, I did, and people are also pointing that out. And some think like the photograph, or it looks good. Others think that it doesn't. So it's kind of interesting to see different people's takes on that. But
Yeah.
whether or not he was good looking or could be considered to be good looking would have no bearing on his influence and his ability to manipulate people. I mean, if you've seen, for those who have seen the Keep Sweet documentary, I think most would agree that Warren Jeffs is not much to look at, but
No.
but a scarily powerful figure in the community.
Yeah.
So, it just, I guess that's just something that I know always gets me a little bit, is this idea that he was really attractive or good looking when he really, really didn't have to be. So
the authority that he held over his followers and believers is, as Warren Jeff's example, right? It is
RFM
enough
is
to
calling
show.
me.
Is he?
Do you want me to answer it?
Sure, but let him know he's on the show right now.
Oh, I'm sure he knows. I'm
Okay.
sure he knows that we are live on air right now. Hey, RFM. Oh, he's mad that you didn't pick up.
Oh, I'm sorry. I got my phone on silent, so it isn't beeping.
Okay, he's gonna call you back so you can pick up and put him on air.
Okay, let's do that.
All right, bye. Are you able to connect your phone up?
I think so. You can hear that?
Hello, this is Radio Free Mormon.
Hey, RFM, you are on the air right now on Mormonism Live.
Now we know how backyard.
Hey, everybody. I know, absolutely. But I wanted to just call and see how everything's going. I've been busy at this big celebration for Sandra Tanner, which apparently is not a secret anymore since it's over. You can hear everybody talking in the background. We had a wonderful time. Sandra was just fantastic. I opened. There were like 8 or 10 speakers. We had 2.5 minutes each. I started so I could do a few good jokes. My Dean Martin impression was a big wow. Then Humphrey Bogart, and after that, everybody else was off to a good start.
Awesome. I'm glad that went well, and I think it's an incredible thing to kind of celebrate Sandra Tanner and all the work that she's done. What are your thoughts on this Joseph Smith picture?
I will tell you, I don't know enough about it really to have too many thoughts about it. My only thought that I have about it is I am not sure why everybody is so excited about it. It doesn't excite me the way that it excites other people, but obviously there's a lot of excitement. Have you figured out what that is yet?
We were talking a little bit about that. I shared that part of it for me, Maven said that it really wasn't super interesting to her, and namely because of the things that Joseph we know that he did in terms of unhealthy behavior towards others. But I'll tell you, RFM, for me, it is anytime we have to face reality the way it really is, it maybe causes us to pause and go like, maybe what else did we embellish? What else did we alter and make it look a certain way, but it really didn't happen that way? And so I think that believing members having to wrestle with the appearance of Joseph Smith might nudge them to consider other parts of Joseph's life that maybe we didn't get right as well.
Hey, I think that's really an interesting insight. But I will tell you, I see this picture. If that's Joseph Smith, he's a damn fine-looking man.
Yeah, but also maybe that's a guy who could be a little more of a scoundrel too, right?
Yes, but can I just say, I'm standing right here with Sandra Tanner. I feel like I'm a sports announcer. I'm live here at the 18th hole, and we've got Sandra Tanner. She's teeing up. Sandra, right now I'm talking to Bill, and Maven on Mormonism Live. Thousands upon millions of people are listening to every word that I'm saying, and I wanted to give you the phone right now and just say a few words about how thrilled you were by the comments I made tonight.
Well, since I know that Bill Reel always tells the truth, I was so thrilled to have him at this to do because no one tells it better than him. And there you are. Wish you guys were all here with us. It's a fun day.
Awesome. Congratulations, Sandra. What a beautiful thing to celebrate all the things that you've contributed to this space and helping people to have information to be able to kind of wake up from Mormonism and take their life back and to make their own kind of independent choices away from all of the pressure that the church gives people.
Thank you, Sandra.
Yes. Thank you. Okay. Do I hand this back to Bill?
Yeah. That'll be RFM. Yep.
All right. Here is the only truth and living RFM.
Thank you so much.
Even.
Yes. And
even Radio Free Mormon.
Even Radio Free Mormon. And that's the way it was.
Yeah.
On this day.
Well, cool.
July
RFM.
21st?
Are you excited about your magic tricks? It's what's going to be the grand finale?
Well,
July 27, 2022. About my magic trick?
Yeah, what's going to be the showstopper at the end?
Okay, here it is. Now, we're not even in the same town, are we?
You and I?
Ready?
Yeah.
Yes, right now, we're going to do the most amazing trick.
Okay.
Over the line. Now, I am thinking of a number between 1 and 100. Tell me what it is, Bill, right now. Don't give it a lot of thought. Just come with the first number that comes to your head. I'm thinking of it. What is it?
7.
7. You're absolutely right.
Ta-da.
Fantastic, Bill.
Look at that. Good
You're
job.
an amazing person. You should be doing the show on Saturday instead
Good
of
job.
me.
Yeah.
All right. With that, Lane, you want to hear my Dean Martin?
Sure. What's your Dean Martin?
I did a little bit. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Everybody loves my body sometimes. Oh yeah. Did I go okay?
That's
Are people liking it?
Oh, that's
That's
perfect.
brilliant. They're
Hold on.
loving it.
Oh yeah. Okay. They're eating it up. And here's my Humphrey Bogart that I did. It was like Humphrey Bogart was talking about Mormon apologists, right? He says, Mormon apologists. The only thing a Mormon apologist understands is the slap in the face and a slug from a 45.
Yeah. Hey, just
Here's looking at you, kid.
Just FYI, the apologist took down that Fair Mormon cheat sheet on did God have sex with Mary? They finally removed it, but they left the Harold B. Lee page up still.
Oh, well, I guess they've received the slap in the face. They're just waiting for the slug from a 45.
Yeah. But it's interesting the effect that we're having on apologetics because they are having to rewrite their approaches minute by minute as we address them.
You are a force of nature, Bill Real. A force de mesure.
Love it. Love it. Well, you have a good time in Salt Lake City. And folks, if you're in Salt Lake City this weekend, don't miss out on Radio Free Mormon's Magic Show.
Hey, we're in Alpine. We're in Alpine, Utah.
Alpine,
right
Utah.
Now.
Look
where
at
we
that.
are.
Nice.
Who was that cat who back in like February gave the talk that got everybody so upset about the question we should be asking? That was in Alpine, right? That was Brad
Wilcox.
Yeah.
Brad Wilcox, yeah. After we're done here, we're going to go over to Brad Wilcox's house and TP it.
You're going to TP Brad Wilcox's house. I want photos. If you don't have any pictures, it didn't happen.
Sandra says TP is too expensive, to which I say, yeah, well, I didn't say it was going to be unused.
I love it. Remember.
Are we really live? Is this going out over the...
Yeah, we're...
And here's my new friend. Is that Natalie? Hi, Natalie. We're on Mormonism Live. It's okay. All right, you guys keep going. Do great. I love you. And do not run away with my spot, Maven, okay? Because that's my main worry here.
Okay.
Have a great night, RFM.
Much to worry about.
You guys, you have a great time. I love you both.
Take it easy.
Thanks, RFM.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. So he's having a lot of fun. Glad he was able to call in.
Well, we were getting some really good comments about the photo too, so I got behind on that.
But, yeah.
By
all means.
So yeah, and I'll have to kind of catch up, but I think I don't know. I'll just throw them up. You keep going, Bill. We'll
Sure.
keep going from here.
All right. So here was that AI software photo juxtaposed against the new Smith image. Again, I'm I'm a little kind of like, that looks more similar than that AI image does to the idea of Joseph Smith that we have in our culture. At least I thought so. There's a color one, which I like. I think it was Jonathan Streeter who touched this up and added some color to it so that it would just be a little more real looking. This is the death mask overlaid on the new image of Joseph Smith. The big thing in similarities that people were pointing out is this mark above the nose, which is in both images, the David Rogers portrait, as well as this new image that surfaced, almost kind of an indentation or some sort of scar or something above the bridge of the nose, off to the side just a little bit. It is interesting as we look at the portrait. I'll put some other things up here. Let me find it. Let's go here. F11. I'm going to put my image up here. So people are saying like this looks like an older man, and I just want to cause people to have a little bit of pause. If you're looking at the screen right now, you'll see my cursor on this new image that's been published this week. You can see where there's like this grain fan kind of brush across the image. And I don't think it's just these lines. You can kind of see them start over here, and you can kind of see it brush all the way across, like that one across his nose. You can see it go right underneath the eye, and it kind of drops down a little bit and goes right across the nose and keeps going. And so I think some of these lines we think are age lines may have something to do with the daguerreotype or some of the damage done to it over the years. So not every one of these lines in his forehead, which, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I just don't think those are all age lines. That would be unrealistic. And so I think some of what we see as an older man is really the daguerreotype image and some of the characteristics of it rather than the person in the, I'm going to say photo. But there's that. There were lots of things that struck me, and I'll just point out some of them, then I can show you maybe some pictures of some of these. But right above the lip, and there's that kind of, the fulcrum, I think is what RFM taught me the word a few weeks ago, right?
Uh-huh.
And in the fulcrum, there's like a little like bigger circle spot right there. And it also seems to be on the image of Smith. The hair being lower on one side and being on the correct side. The hairline kind of going up where it does. Now, again, the combed hair in this image on the right is different than the portrait by David Rogers. But the hairline kind of where it goes to is very similar in both. The nose is longer on the David Rogers portrait, but we know from the death mask #1 and from the fact that David Rogers also did a portrait of Emma Smith, and her nose is also longer in the portrait than it was in her photographs through her life. So we know that Rogers did get some things wrong. And when you look at the death mask seems to indicate that Joseph's lips and mouth were wider than what David Rogers portrays in the image. So the nose and the lips are big parts of what throw us off. And we know from the death mask that those aren't exactly represented well in the Rogers portrait. And again, Joseph and Emma both said they didn't really think it captured them very well. Other little things, the kind of lines coming out around the mouth, they're both present in both photos. Another thing I thought was kind of interesting is above Joseph's, his left eye, but it's the right eye in the picture, but obviously it's, that's his left eye. There's like a scar or a little mark that kind of goes up. And I noticed there's something going on the photo on that same eye. It looks like maybe some sort of scar or indentation. I thought maybe it was shadow, but I just noted that it is present in both the portrait and in the image. Let me see if that was all of them. I had let's go. There we go. Let's get rid of that one. The curvature of the mouth going down. These are all things that, at least most of these are things that Locke Mackay and the Community of Christ and the John Whitmer Association all pointed out as well. The chin in the portrait seems to be a little off center. Maybe at one time Joseph suffered a broken jaw. In the photo, it also looks like the chin is off center. So there seems to be some similarity there. I mentioned the little round spot kind of above the lip. He seems to have that in both images. There seems to be kind of a little line below the eyes and kind of represented in both. We talked about the scar already above the bridge of the nose or the indentation. We talked about the spot above the eyebrow, the hair hanging lower, and the hairline. I think there's enough things here that it, at least to me, is compelling. And then, the research that they did, they showed that going back as far as, I believe, 1869, there are photographs of family members wearing what looks like that same pendant that this image was on. And then it was worn again, I think, in 1875 in an image, and then also in 1879, where the daughters or granddaughters of Joseph Smith III were getting married or had major life events. And in the photographs that they're in, they all seem to be wearing this pendant. And so I thought the provenance of the pendant is, to at least some degree, kind of shown out that it was in the Smith family for the right time period. While we can't go back further than 1869, we at least get back to that moment. And then what they did with the photo was they took the death mask and allowed it to correct some of these issues in the portrait, like the long nose or the lips. And then they basically used the David Rogers portrait, the death mask, and this new photo, and found that this photo had about a 90% match, and that it would be ideal to be able to go forward and say it absolutely is Joseph Smith, to have a 95% match, but at least to know that it was just below that. And the Community of Christ and Locke Mackay, the John Whitmer Association, all seem to be pretty confident that we do have the image of Joseph Smith here captured in this daguerreotype. Any thoughts on any of those things? Do you see any of those kinds of similarities in the face that I'm circling there in those pictures?
Yeah, and we've had a few people point out some others. I put them up at the time.
I got you. I'm kind of looking down at my papers at times and looking at the images themselves. Any of them that you remember offhand?
Let me see if I can. I should have notated it.
Yeah, no sweat.
Yeah,
again, there's those creases in the face too.
So it is up underneath there. But and you can tell me when a good point to go to this is I would like to talk about the church's reaction to
Please.
it. So is this a good point, or we can?
Yeah, if you want to put, do you have an image of their statement? If not, no biggie. You can just read it.
I can share. So this is from thechurchnews.com. I don't know if that's actually how official that is, but here, let me go ahead and share my screen on that. Okay. All right. And I have highlighted it. So this was their official statement. Every few years, potential donors bring artifacts to the Church History Library for review. So this is where I got that info, including alleged photographs.
Sorry about that.
Such artifacts are, of course, of great interest to the church, though it was not mentioned specifically in the article. Church historians, archivists, and artifact experts were provided by the item's owner and the article's authors the opportunity to analyze the locket and photo and to review their findings prior to publication. We concur that the daguerreotype and locket were created of the materials and methods appropriate to the 1840s. However, as nothing is definitively known about the locket's history before 1992, we cannot draw a conclusion about who is pictured in the daguerreotype. We welcome the recent publication of the image and hope it will prompt the discovery of additional information helpful to determining its authenticity. So there was that. And then I did save some of these comments made earlier. So let's see. I think, here we go, by Garth. Here's how you know if the church is true. Pray to know if Joseph Smith was hot or not. There was another one that was asking or saying the church should pray about it. And, and there's been many comments, I think, in Reddits and in forums and things like that the church could know, just like with Hoffman, if something was real or not. And you think they would, but I think what's been comical to me is just how far they seem to want to stay away from this. They don't really want to touch it or engage with it at all. And so, and of course, we all know why. Hoffman is still alive and well in the memories of the the leaders of the church, I think. So I think that's the main reason why. But I'm also kind of curious. I've been wondering to myself, if this image does start to become more and more widely accepted, are we going to start seeing this kind of a picture incorporated in the church's artwork and materials that it, officially sponsors or puts in the ensign or Liahona? I'm kind of curious if they're going to maybe start subtly kind of start changing things over, or if they're going to ignore it completely, or wait 50 years to be sure, like everyone else. That's kind of my question. It would be interesting to see.
Yeah, and I'll add, I have two sources for this information. I'll read one of them. Regarding the newly found Joseph Smith daguerreotype, and I'm going to keep part of this out because I don't want to give away who this person is. So they list their credentials. They tell us why they should be trusted as a source. And they say, with the previously found portrait, they were clear that while it passed every test they made using computer-aided comparisons to the death mask, etc., and while they believed it to be him, they saw no benefit in making any official statement given the risk of new evidence proving them wrong. In other words, Mark Hoffman in that whole episode has burned them. And so while behind the scenes, the church has indicated that it too believes that it really is the image of Joseph Smith, that face matches the measurements of the death mask, that they are not going to go on the record saying as much because of the risk of being wrong and not wanting to have to go through that again. So, and I had two sources for that. That was one of them. So just FYI, which I also thought was kind of an interesting kind of little tidbit of information to go along with this. And then I'll show a couple other little things here. The Community of Christ found a similar sized piece. It's actually not a perfect circle. And the way in which it's not a perfect circle, both of these are very similar in that way. So it's almost like they were both cut with the same die press. But this one on the right is Lucy Mack Smith, and about 1844. And it was cropped from I don't know what that is, Carte de Visite photograph, courtesy of the Community of Christ. So at least to note, like, there are lots of little things that line up that seem to say, like, hey, like, here we have Joseph Smith's mother with a very similar image, similar pose, although at a different distance, it appears, and that her image was also cut into a circle and in the same way that this photograph of this person alleged to be Joseph Smith was cut. They've also had folks who are experts in daguerreotypes look at these and kind of go like, yeah, it's the right time frame. I'm going to guess somewhere in the mid 1840s. Again, this wasn't invented until 1839. The process got slightly more perfected in different ways, and the actual photograph process, I don't think was invented until like 1860 or so, if I'm saying that right, somewhere in that time frame. But this particular type of daguerreotype is dated to kind of that mid 1840s range, where the experts said, yeah, I think the most likely date is 1843. And again, we're talking about 1843, 1844, that this would have happened. Because Lucian Foster, who is crucial to the story, he arrived in Nauvoo April 27th, 1844, and rented a room at the Mansion House, and had likely come to Nauvoo already trained with his supplies to do daguerreotypes, and departs Nauvoo on June 19th of 1844, heading to Cleveland, Ohio, to help with Smith's presidential campaign. Joseph is killed on June 27th, 1844, and the Fosters said Foster had such a small window to do this, but he's living in the Mansion House. The Fosters return. So after Joseph Smith's killed, Brother Foster comes back to Nauvoo, but he's living in the Mansion House. It's really the short time period between April 27th, 1844 and June 27th, 1844, when the prophet is killed. And he's got that small window. But the fact that Joseph Smith III mentions him seems to indicate that in this milieu of historical context, that Joseph Smith III did think that Lucian Foster had worked with his father. And the fact that he's living in the Mansion House with the prophet's family also gives credibility to that. So that was kind of a cool thing. Let's let me see here, May 1885, 6 years after his mother's death, Joseph Smith III said, in visiting at my stepfather's, I found a number of letters and other things left by my mother that the major, that's Joseph, Emma Smith's second husband, Bittman, major kindly gave into my keeping. I felt these to be quite valuable gifts, for they included a daguerreotype of my father that I had forgotten was in existence. And this is believed to be the David Rogers one, but it also could possibly be this image we're talking about. That was produced by Lucian Foster, if it is an image of Joseph Smith. Again, Emma Smith noted the Rogers portrait was not a good likeness of Joseph, that his countenance was changing all the time. And then again, I mentioned Bertha Madison Smith is wearing what looks like this pendant that it's found in 1869. And then Emma J. Smith McCallum is wearing that similar pendant, again, looks like it's that pendant, in 1875 and 1879. So there's that. Let me see. I had a couple other little things, and I actually should probably put up the show here, or the call list, and get that kind of started. Any thoughts on kind of the provenance of all of this and some of the research that the Community of Christ did and the John Whitmer Association did on the background of this?
Not what they've done, but I did like that the one who discovered it. I put up, again, this is another comment I put up about someone said that they prayed about it and they had a feeling, which might have seemed kind of jokey, but that is what was said. And this is from the Deseret News. I'll go ahead and go back to sharing my screen again.
Please.
Let's see. Sorry, I got to stop the one that I had and switch over to something else here. Okay, so this one here. Okay, so this is I'm going to highlight this here. It says super experience. So I just liked it because it's just more elevation, emotion as confirmation of something that I think is wanted to be believed and wanted to be known. So he says, we just know that is who it is. We know that the time was right for it to come out. And I strongly believe with my wife, we feel Joseph Smith felt it was time for it to come out also. So yes, I know that is who it is. So yeah, it's just kind of interesting to me. And I do think that there are members of the church who are going off of feelings and getting different answers about whether or not this is really him or not. And it's just kind of interesting. So I'm curious what you've noticed about faithful reactions to this.
Juxtaposed against the church led by prophets, seers, and revelators, unable to get an answer about whether this is Smith or not. As you point out, anytime we get enough people praying about something, all of which believe they have access to the Holy Ghost and are able to discern truth, there's always mixed results, isn't there?
Right.
It is. It's a strange thing.
Some people really like it. I mean, of course, obviously, I think there is more of a bias to tend to like it on the faithful side versus a bias against it on the less faithful side, which is obviously understandable. But yeah, I showed it to my brother and sister-in-law when it looked like it was more authentic, and they didn't have much of a reaction, but I don't know if it was because it was coming from me or not, or maybe they would have had a conversation on their own if it was interesting to them or not. But it appeared not to actually interest them that much, which I found interesting in itself. Of course, that the one on the outside is more interested that this came out than them, and that's even with, again, like I said earlier, it's not groundbreaking for me, but you would think that it would be for those still in.
Yeah, and I'm having, for whatever reason, I'm having a little bit of trouble showing, getting the call kind of started here. So give me a second, but I do want to put up, in fact, let's put back up this one, and we can show some of the similarities here. I'm going to mute my mic for just a second.
Okay. Yeah, no, I'll go ahead and go through these. I don't have much commentary on it, but I do, like, Bill went through all this work to kind of put these photos together. So this one is the one that I was saying looked really young. And so we can see this is someone made the daguerreotype also look a little bit young. I still don't think it really matches very much, but here are these two put together. Oh, and then this one. I want to know who did this one. But yeah, I like that they kind of matched the background and the styling. This has been making the rounds as well in the different forums. So anyway, yeah, hopefully we can get
Will you
some.
go back to that one for just a second, Maven? I just want to say one thing about it.
Yeah.
I've had folks who are part of Helen Mar Kimball's family reach out on Facebook and other places and say like, hey, this image is kind of hurting us. And I just want to acknowledge that. I'm torn because I think sometimes for us to recognize how harmful something is, it really needs to be in our face. And I think putting an image of Helen Mar Kimball as a 14-year-old sitting right next to this photo alleged to be the prophet Joseph Smith really creates some stark contrast of an older man and a younger woman. And I even had this week on a Facebook post, there was this debate going on where somebody goes like, hey, she's not underage. Like, people are allowed to marry at 14 years old in multiple states across the country at this time. And I just want to note, there's lots of problems with that. So first off, that's true. Yeah. It also struck me, by the way, I had this light bulb moment that we, whoever those people were, there were people who created laws that allowed 14-year-old girls to get married. And you can start to go like, is that so they can marry a 15-year-old boy? Like, probably not. There's probably some degree of folks who are really unhealthy creating space to carry out their unhealthiness. The issues with the argument of going like, hey, 14 is a normal age to marry. First off, 14 is very rare. I don't have the graph in front of me, but 14 is an extremely rare thing in this time period. Not only that, but when a 14-year-old married, it almost never was going to be a 37-year-old man. It was a 17-year-old boy or an 18-year-old boy. And there was an age difference most of the time, but not significant. And the next thing you have to kind of do when you get involved in that debate is you have to go like, okay, so maybe 14 happens once out of every, 800 marriages, whatever it is. But then whoever that person's marrying, we have to do a study on what their age is. And it almost never was an older man of that age. Now, it did happen, but we're talking extremely rare. And then the next thing you have to do is you have to open up the question of, it doesn't matter what the rules are in 1830, 1843 or 1844. What matters is that there's a heavenly Father who's an all-knowing being who has access to speak directly to his prophet. And if God is all-knowing and we all go, not even just my current sensibilities, we just all intuitively know that a 14-year-old isn't capable and that it would be traumatic for her to enter this kind of life event of what happened to Helen Mar Kimball. Heavenly Father could have stepped in at any moment and stopped it. Like, he helps the girl find her keys in Layton, Utah, but he doesn't tell Joseph Smith, knock it off. And so you might be able to make a case like in West Virginia and these other 7 states, it's legal. But until you can answer the question of why God allows it, when we're talking about serious trauma to a child, then I just don't buy into the fact that go like, well, it's the law and it's on the books, so we don't get to argue it. God isn't held by any law in any current moment of time. Just God is an all-knowing being.
It's moral and vice versa.
Right. Yeah. So there are lots of questions that would have to be addressed that will point to, it doesn't matter what's on the books. There's some other things that need to be addressed first before you could even begin to make an argument that something like this is okay. And it's not. So,
and I want to say, I don't know, this is a series my friend is trying to get me into. And so unfortunately I haven't seen it and I don't have the information, but I do believe it's on Hulu. It's called I Was a Child Bride, the Untold Story. I think that's what it is. And it goes over many, and this is modern. These are women, not just like in the FLDS Keep Sweet documentary, but all over the US that are still being married at these young ages. And a lot of times people want to say that they're consenting to it, which like you're saying, Bill, they're not able to, an important part of consent is to be able to have the ability to fully understand what it is that you're consenting to. And that's just not something that teenagers have. But even then, most of the time they didn't have it anyway. Some of these stories, these women were telling that their parents they didn't sign their own marriage certificate. Their parents did it for them. And it was parents really behind the majority of these, marriages to these older men that were often awful and abusive, as they tend to be. Because I almost think it's not a good man, I think, who wants to marry somebody this young. And I think some people want to say, like, yeah, there's pedophiles out there, but maybe some people can genuinely just be in love with and care for, somebody a lot younger than them. But I just don't think you can, because I think there is inherently that manipulation factor, and just knowing, the reason why this person or this age is attractive to somebody like Joseph Smith or Warren Jeffs or anybody else who does it, is because they know inherently that they're more able to influence and control that person. I think that's part of where the attraction comes for them, is that ability to control. So I am sympathetic to Helen Mar Kimball's family. But like you said, it is something that happened. And so I don't, I also feel conflicted, because if it's real and it's true, I think we ought to be able to face it. But this is something, sorry, I'm kind of going back and forth, but I did want to go back to that this still happens now, and the women that also still marry young now, we have their testimonies at how harmful and awful it is. So, and unfortunately, there's a lot of, there's just so many leaders in the country that seem not to care. One of our own, like, Utah senators, Kurt Bramble, was said before that he didn't think marital rape was a thing. He also didn't see if there was a problem with him having sex with his wife if she was sleeping. And we've just heard some really atrocious things too from legislators about, whether women can get pregnant if they are raped, as if they can. And so and this was something else, and I don't remember which senator it was, or like which leader it was, but when these women were trying to advocate to try to get these laws changed so that they would that they wouldn't be legal anymore, he basically said, I can't, I don't want to mess with marriages that people have consented to. And that's with these women there saying, like, we were too young to consent. So I really do think sometimes I really worry about the kind of character that we have in our leadership today that are running the country and making these decisions for us. That's my rant.
Yeah. And if you know much about the Jeffrey Epstein case, you understand that powerful people who have very unhealthy desires inside their head have often sought out ways to meet those needs in very traumatic, harmful ways to people around them. And just a note, as we keep talking about consent, uninformed consent isn't consent. If you don't understand the repercussions, if you are being groomed, if there is high amounts of pressure, if you are given threats of spiritual destruction, if you're only given 24 hours to make a decision and you're up all night worrying about it, and then you come back and say, I don't think so, and the person gives you 24 more hours to decide, such as the case with Lucy Walker, by the way, you have to recognize that 48 hours without any sleep and that much kind of worry will almost certainly lead to some sort of hallucination or experiencing feelings and thoughts that weren't natural. And then, so suddenly you think it's an answer and you come back and go, like, I got my answer. I'm supposed to do this. And the reality is a young kid at 16 years old, having gone through 48 hours of sleep deprivation with that much pressure and threats towards spiritual destruction and having to come up with an answer, that answer can't be trusted. It can't hold up. It shouldn't be allowed to. And so uninformed consent is not consent. So,
right.
Yeah.
I think it is a common mistake. A yes is not a yes if it's forced out, and it should be really obvious. But I think there's a lot of people that don't understand that if you're not, like, physically being held, with your hands tied behind your back to get married, then that's somehow consent. And I'm going to go back to the Keep Sweet documentary. They women there, one of them had said that that she didn't even know she had a choice. None of the women ever even thought about it in that way. It's just what you did. It's your lifestyle. And I actually related to that, because yes, we're not as strict here. And so yes, we definitely have women like me that they go by without getting married, etc. But it was still, that was how I felt growing up. This is the way. It wasn't a choice. It was a choice to be good or not. It was a choice to follow the prophet or not. And so, my role was to be wife and mother, and that was the one. So, yeah.
There's so many facets of this that don't feel right or healthy or appropriate to you or me,
Right.
Regardless of what century or decade we're living in. Yeah, totally. I want to put we can move quickly through this. Just to note, and again, I do think Emma has a kind of a long nose in the photograph, but this portrait would have been about a 2-year difference, 1 or 2 year difference from this photograph. And yet, as you can also see in the portrait, she looks much younger, just like the portrait of Joseph Smith. Whereas in the photograph, looks like a little older, a little more full face. So again, just some reasons maybe to doubt the portrait juxtaposed against Joseph Smith's this recent alleged photograph of him. There are other ones. I don't need to go through these, just other pictures of Emma. There's one with her older. There's another one. But I think that's it.
Yep.
So anything else from you? I think we've covered this. We can take a few phone calls and call it a night.
Yeah. Cool.
Folks, that I've got one call in the queue. But folks, if you want to call, you can join Mormonism live. Call 662 Mormons with an S on the end, or 662-667.
Yes, sorry, I did want to point out this comment. Sorry, I went over the phone number. Emma did have a sleepy eye. I believe it was actually from one of her births. That was really traumatic. That almost cost her life. That is something that I've heard reported before, that one of her eyes was just a little bit sleepy since that event. So,
and you can see the portrait kind of captures that, but puts her at an angle that softens up your perceiving it, if that makes sense. So there are things that when you're painting a portrait of somebody, you have to make them look good. You can't have them look not good. And so there are some things that any artist is going to do to try to put that best presentation of that person forward. And as you're pointing out, the droopy eye is one of those things. So thank you for saying that, Maeve. That's I'm glad the person pointed out and you mentioned it. All right. Let's see here. We've got, I believe it's maybe Cody. Cody, are you on the line?
I am.
Cody, you're on Mormonism Live with Maven and Bill Reel. RFM's not here, but he did call in earlier. What's on your mind?
I'll take Maven over RFM any day.
Nice.
So my uncle is DJ Bodden. He was commissioned with the Death Mask back in the 80s. And he worked with a lot of forensic professionals to reconstruct the face based off of all the information that the church gave him. And according to his fireside, he did have the measurements of the skull and the skeletal structure. And I guess the church had that. I don't know if that's true or not, but somebody sent this new picture to him on Facebook and asked him what he thought. And he said, the bone structure is all wrong, cheekbones, the brow bone, the nose is all wrong, and the mouth and chin is all wrong. But I find your analysis with the circles on the picture interesting. But I will say this. If that picture is not Joseph Smith, I just barely woke up from the Mormon dream myself, and I'm with Maven. If when this came out, I'm like, big flipping deal, this guy was a pervert. I don't even want to know what he looked like. But if this guy gets stuck with the image of Joseph Smith and it's not, and more people wake up to who he was, I feel bad for the guy.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's the thing we on the show want to do, is at least give people enough things that they start to think deeper about Mormon history, that they go and learn as much of the history as they can, and then begin to make informed decisions about how they'll spend their time, energy, and resources. And I think wrestling with the photo is just one small drop in a bucket of doing that.
Yeah, and I hope that it leads people to, I hope it leads people to kind of wake up and want to find out more about Jesus and just go outside of the scope. I mean, in all reality, all we have to do is go to the church website and dig into the Joseph papers. That's what I did. I was writing a book about the evidence of the church, and that's when I'm like, holy cow, who was this guy?
Yeah.
And I hope this picture kind of wakes people up to what I've just, I mean, I have spent the last month just watching all of your podcasts and waking up to everything, and I'm super grateful for it. I'm a single dad of 3 boys, raising 3 boys of my own, getting them ready for missions, and now what I learned, they learned, and I'm super grateful for you guys making us aware of how this church started and what kind of man Joseph Smith was. And I hope this picture kind of wakes people up to that.
Yeah, I think it will, at least a few. And every episode we do, we're hoping to catch a few at a time.
Thanks, Cody. And I appreciate
All right, thanks.
The place that you're in now. Like, it seems like you're doing really well, and I'm glad you're able to save your boys from missions that we know have been so harmful. But if this really is the last month, I
go
feel
through the
for you.
steps of grief.
Oh, say that again.
You go through all the steps of grief going through this crisis of faith, especially with the nature of the Mormon church.
Yeah.
And it's your reputation. And then you go through anger, and then depression and sadness and gratefulness that you're out of it, you know. And anyways, it's been good, and you guys have helped a lot. So appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks,
well,
my
good
friend.
luck to you and your boys.
Thank you.
All right. The next call we've got, I believe this is going to be Christian. Christian, are you on the line?
I am here. How
Awesome.
you doing, Bill?
I'm doing great, my friend. What do you think about tonight's show?
Well, first I have to say I love this new feature where we can actually listen to the show while we're on hold. That is brilliant. And Maven, if that was you, it just proves your brilliance, like we all already know. So thank you. No, honestly, I've been studying the photographs and and the death masks quite a while. And this may sound weird, conspiratorial, and whatever else, and I have no doubt you'll just kind of shrug and be like, oh, that's interesting. But it wouldn't stun me at this point looking at the facial structures of Hiram and Joseph and how vastly different they are for being brothers. If Joseph's mask was maybe altered a little bit to look more like the handsome young Roman aristocrat type look with the dominant nose, the narrow face, you know, all that stuff, you know, the dominant chin and everything. And sure, Hiram has a dominant chin as well, but those facial structures are very different for 2 people that are supposed to be, you know, directly related DNA brothers. And it just wouldn't surprise me because I don't know if we have good documentation of the mask from the moment it was, you know, applied to post-mortem Joseph's face to when it showed up in our museum. So anyways, that's my weird conspiracy thought, and I will listen to your response off the phone. So thank you very much.
Thank you, my friend.
Thanks, Christian.
And
I would be curious how easy it would be to actually do something like that. If that would be my first question, to know if it's plausible, because like we've shown before with sometimes apologists with the one we did about claiming that I'm sorry, losing my words here, claiming that the parts of the book of Abraham referencing the facsimiles were added in later, and how Dan Vogel showed us that would be really difficult to kind of insert those in and make it look natural, just because the lines were a little bit off. I kind of wonder if that would be, if this is a similar case, would it be extremely difficult in reality to actually make that happen, or would it be really easy?
Yeah, I don't know. And I'm glad you put this picture up, because during this week of preparation, there was a mention somewhere, I don't remember where, but there was a mention somewhere of the chin of Hiram Smith's death mask was severely damaged and they had to reconstruct it. And we're not exactly sure if we got it right. So that you can see right there from the image that seems to be the case. I don't know if this is the original. I don't know. I know there were at least 2 originals made by Wilford Wood from the faces of the 2 brothers. I don't know if the other one had similar issues or what, but I do know that somebody brought up the fact that there was damage to one of the original chins of the death mask. So you can see it there. Mm-hmm. Let me see if we got any other calls. I
have heard a lot of people say that they felt that the daguerreotype looks more like Hiram. But I think, yeah, I mean, if they are brothers, That's another thing that I think will make things difficult, and I almost wonder if it could ever really be known 100% just because they have similar DNA, so that they would just be close enough that you never really could
And being
differentiate.
shot in the face would affect how your face looks, right? And falling out of a second floor window would have, if you landed on your head or face, would affect how your face looks. So even with the death mask, they're not the perfect way to get to the bottom of it. And so there may be some mystery for some time. But again, we're left with whether this is significant enough or not to draw any sort of conclusion. But 'tis life. Like, I think life is full of things we can't know for sure. And here perhaps is another one.
Yep.
You had one little last thing you wanted to show.
If we don't have any more colors, this was just something I nicked off.
We just have one last one. I'll end the calls here.
Yep.
And let me pull on Steve. You'll be our final caller, and then Maven's gonna show us one more thing. But are you there, my friend?
Yep. Thanks.
Okay. Now I've got a note here that you want to talk about something new. I would really want it to be sort of related.
Okay. I won't bring it up then, but I thought that I didn't watch the whole show all the way through.
Yeah.
It was good. What I did think was interesting, do you guys follow Mormon book reviews at all?
Yep.
Because they covered it last week. And then what's really cool about that is they got the community of Christ going on and all the breakoffs. You guys, what do you think about them?
Well, I'll tell you, in our resource notes, you'll see that we included the interview with John Hamer, Locke Mackay, and the Mormon Book Club. And just to note that, again, I think from their side of things, from Locke and Hamer and the John Whitmer Association, the Community of Christ, they're fairly confident. I mean, again, we can't be 100% sure, but they're fairly confident that this is Joseph Smith.
Yeah, I was kind of persuaded by the argument when they were talking about the details inside of his face and how it matched up with stuff. And doesn't look like the Joseph Smith we learned about, but could be. And the thing is, we'll never know.
Well, all the aspects of Joseph Smith aren't the Joseph Smith we learned about.
Yeah, that's
good
true.
point.
Yeah.
No, he's a God-saving prophet. All right, thank you.
All right, have a great day, my friend.
Yeah, that is a really good episode. I highly recommend checking that out with Stephen Pinnaker. But someone had asked, because it does seem like even in the paintings, the older ones, he's clearly brown-haired. And so I kind of wonder when the blue-eyed, blonde-haired Joseph, like that we've seen in all the movies, when did that get inserted into the...
Isn't that strange? I was thinking about that this week. Like this portrait here by David Rogers is kind of a reddish brown. And yet when we watch anything the church puts out today, it's this blonde hair, blue-eyed guy, huh?
Yeah.
Such a strange thing.
Just maybe the skin gets lighter and lighter for Jesus and hair gets lighter and lighter for Joseph. It's just, yeah.
It is. It's such an odd thing. Why don't you take us home, Maven, with a little video clip? Because somebody made Joseph look much more realistic. There isn't any sound with this. I know he's lip syncing something, and I don't really know the meaning behind that, unless you for sure do. But it's kind of cool to see a lifelike image moving around a little bit.
Yep. Here we go.
Give Brother Joseph a break.